Hey everybody, welcome to In the Node. Hey everybody, today we are here to talk about network security. And who are we?
Hello, my name is Brandon, Junior Systems Administrator here at Nagios. I also work on the security team as well.
I'm Cody Byers. I'm also a Junior System Administrator, and I work on the security team as well.
And I'm Aaron, Product Development Manager here at Nagios. So, gentlemen, we're taking a look at how network security works. And so from a product perspective, of course, we're curious about network security monitoring. And, you know, I want to talk about it kind of from a basic standpoint, like how it really works. And here's kind of my understanding so far, right? So like we're curious about like intrusion detection, and we're curious about intrusion prevention, and it all comes down to packets, right? I mean, and so here's there's so many packets, like so many.
A lot of packets. A lot of packets.
All of the packets, you know?
All of the packets. And so kind of set me up, like what's going on with packets? How do we deal with this? And why is it that packets tell us the information that we're looking for from a network security perspective?
Well, I think the first thing we're going to want to do is we should talk about how we're going to collect these packets, right? Because there's multiple different ways you can collect them. You got to be able to organize them, sift through them. And that's where I think you'd want to start.
Okay. So packets happen, right?
Yep.
Packets come in, packets go out. Mm-hmm. We got to look at the packets and then hang on to the ones that make us wonder. Is that what you're saying?
That's pretty much what I'm saying. Yeah. So how we collect the packets, all right? There's multiple different ways you can collect them.
All right. How do you know which ones to collect, though?
I would say collect them all.
Collect them all.
Cody?
It's like Pokemon.
Yeah, you got to collect them all, you know?
All the packets.
If you don't collect them all, how do you know which ones are bad and which ones are good?
Right. Well, can't you just check them as they come through?
You can. It depends on how you want to have that set up, though.
Okay.
So,
What are the options with that?
So there's a couple options with the intrusion prevention system.
Okay.
You can do it inline. So that is like you were just saying.
Right.
It analyzes them as they come in, detects like, is it good? Is it bad? And that's based on preset rules and, you know, definitions that you have either with NIST or whoever you...
So there's rules. So like there's rules that are out there. Do people need to come up with their own rules and they need to like sit under a tree and think about them, or there are rule sets available?
There are rule sets available. A lot of security experts recommend you don't just rely on the preset rules because each organization is different. What they have coming in and out is slightly different. So you want to modify those rules to better suit your environment, but the base set of rules will work to help get you up and going and started.
Okay, so there are rules out there that you can apply. Where in the network does that get applied? Is that like right at the entry point to your network? Where do we start? Where do we start the process of looking at a packet and determining, well, okay, maybe we save them all, maybe we don't. Where in the process do we start to decide whether or not we like that packet?
So a lot of times they'll place it in the very beginning, like so right as the router meets the internet. So it's right in between there, and that's if it's inline. So then when a packet goes into this, we're going to call it the intrusion prevention system, it will then analyze it, and based on the rules that you have set prior, it'll either say, oh, this is a good packet and let it through into your network, or it'll say it's a bad packet and then it'll block it or run various different things depending on what you have set up for that. However, there is another method, and this is where an intrusion prevention system can act more as a detection system, because you have it set up not inline, so you have it set up where your switch or your router would mirror all this traffic to this intrusion prevention system. You'd want to do that in case, there's a couple different reasons. One being that if your method you have to ingest all this traffic, there's a power failure there, and it fails closed, you then have no internet to your company at all. So the benefit of doing this mirrored way or non-inline is that if your prevention system goes down, you still have internet to your company. You just don't have the security aspect to that.
How big a risk is it that your intrusion prevention system breaks the entire network if it's in the wrong spot?
Yeah, so if it's in like, you know, at the very high level and it goes down, and again, like the more typically you find the more expensive models of these taps or whatever you want to put in between, generally fail open. So that way, like if it loses power, packets can still flow through. But if you're limited on what you have, then it'll fail closed, and that's where you would lose internet to like all of your.
Okay, so I want to sort that out. So like there are rules about what happens when it fails, right? And so you could set your rules to say if intrusion detection or intrusion prevention, if that process fails, shut everything down.
Yeah.
But you could also say if intrusion prevention fails, keep letting everything through.
Correct, and that's based on the hardware you are using to do the prevention system.
Oh, okay.
So that's not
rule specific
Yeah.
within like whatever program you're using. That's going to be what kind of tap you're using. Does it have the ability to fail open or close? Some just fail closed no matter what.
Yep.
So it comes down to, are you going to get the right hardware? What's going to best suit your environment? And again, like Cody said, how are you going to set up your monitoring? Inline, mirrored, even cloud-based.
Yep.
What would cloud-based look like?
Cloud-based would look something like Microsoft Defender. So Microsoft Defender is an IPS. It does have the ability to detect whether or not a user is opening an unauthorized program, executing malicious commands. Not too long ago, we saw a alert that I triggered because I was trying to find my own admin password. Shortly after I executed that command, it got an alert saying, hey, somebody on my machine is trying to get at the admin passwords.
Okay, so that's that's an internal system. Is that packet based or is that based on some other things?
I think it's got a multitude of different things because Microsoft has its agent on the laptop, its Defender agent that does report up to the cloud, but then it can also detect packets because of like emails. That's our email server as well. So you'll have detection there, and that's where you can also set like, hey, can Outlook open child IDs or child processes? You can set your rules there so that if someone clicks file, it doesn't open.
Okay. All right. So I think what I'm hearing you say is intrusion detection, certainly like right at the beginning, right where your network meets the dirty, unwashed internet. Is one place that you can do detection, but you can also do detection deeper in. It says, if this rule is triggered, it might mean that someone is already inside and we want to check this behavior out.
Yep. So like there's a couple different methods. So that what you were just describing is like host-based intrusion. So that means there's an agent installed on the host. And then what we were talking about before is network-based. So like that is where it's inspecting the packets. That's an inline version. Whereas the host-based has an agent and it can do various different things, packets, scripts, all of which are based on like either like signature-based. So like that's how like the detection mechanism works.
Okay.
Signature-based. So that's like common signatures that like NIST has put out, like, oh, this is a bad packet or a bad process. It knows that based on lots of other historical data from lots of other people that, if it's coming from this port number and this IP address, it's going to be bad. It's a known malicious IP and port number.
Okay. And then are there signatures? Are there bit patterns that they notice in there that are associated with known attacks as well?
Yep, there can be like known, like it's usually hash signatures.
Yep.
It's
Okay.
hashes. But there's also like another detection that's anomaly based. So that way, what you would do is you set it up, and what's normal for your network. Well, you tell your system, you let it learn a little bit. So then, for instance, like if you have a user downloading 100 gigs of data at 3 a.m. on a Saturday, and that's your workers aren't supposed to be working at that time. You would know something's wrong, and it would flag it. It would either deny it, depending on how your rules go. That's kind of the anomaly-based setup there. Then there's policy-based and behavior-based. Like policy-based is, you got some predefined rules in there. You got similar to like what I was saying earlier. That's like where you kind of create your own cookbook of what you want and what based on your own environment. Because if you have certain packets or like packets or processes that are specific to your environment, you may want, known Adobe vulnerabilities, but you don't have Chrome, so you don't care about like Chrome executions.
And I think that's interesting and definitely applicable in a conversation around Nagios technology, because one of the interesting things about Nagios is that as a monitoring solution, we do things and we help our customers do things that sometimes look like intrusions. And so, and there are things about Nagios XI where people say, what are you doing? You're collecting and passing MySQL commands, which looks from one perspective like you're trying to inject some SQL, when in reality what we're doing is we're using SQL commands to monitor certain things. So how do people parse that sort of situation out?
I think that this is actually a decent time to talk about log server. Log server's capabilities with various open source intrusion detection softwares. There's three, the main three. You got Sherikata, you got Zeek, which is formerly known as Bro, and you got Snort. Those are like your three main open source intrusion detection, intrusion prevention softwares, and they collect logs. What you can do is set up Sherikata somewhere in your environment. It's going to start scanning. Could have predefined rules as mentioned earlier by Cody, or you could put your own in there. Once you figure out what your anomalies are, what they aren't, you can pretty much teach. I'm going to use Sherikata here. You can teach Sherikata. This is what we would expect on a normal week. This is our baseline bandwidth usage. This is what we would expect from package, stuff like that. Anything outside of that, alert us. You can do the same thing with log server. If these logs are coming in from Sherikata, we got an issue. And then that's when we can start talking about the integration of XI with log server. So if XI picks up, hey, log server saying that Sherikata is giving them all this, let's trigger off an event handler. We can trigger off an event handler, which do multiple different things. We could shut down some systems. We could send out a few alerts. Event handlers are very versatile. And I think, actually, I firmly believe by properly implementing these open source solutions with log server and XI, you can put yourself together a pretty nice intrusion detection software package.
Cody, what do you think of that?
I agree. I mean, you could definitely use log server to ingest all those logs and help create some policy based. That's kind of like, I think what you were getting at is like how would you define certain things in your environment to like be allowed, right? So like instead of it being a policy based rule to deny, you'd want to just allow. Like, okay, if you have your XI machine on this IP address, it will be sending out some SQL commands. Certain SQL commands are okay. So you got to, just have your intrusion prevention system allow those through and say, hey, this is known traffic. This is okay. If I remember right, I believe a lot of our customers have used SE Linux. That they got to allow a lot of policies through that. That's similar, right? You just got to like train the system to know, like, hey, this traffic's okay. On that note, though, we are like, with the rise of artificial intelligence, intrusion prevention has taken like leaps and bounds with next gen prevention, where it's been used to, or AI has been used to help. Like it gets trained on all these packets as well, and they can make more informed decisions where the previous ones could not, because they were not leveraging artificial intelligence or machine learning. So that's another way where technology has taken a leap to help increase security and make the life of a security professional easier.
Sure. I guess I'm curious about how they would train it, right? Like, and how do we know? Because certainly we've seen in technology, like we know in the coding space that a lot of the AI has been trained on code, both good and bad.
Yep.
And so how do we know that we're training a security AI well?
Well, that's a tough question. You'd have to, be very selective on where you get, the new next gen AI from. And you'd feed it a lot of hashes and stuff. Like again, from NIST is the big one, where they have a plethora of opportunities of past exploitations, where it would show you like, hey, this hash is bad, and it would learn from there like, oh, okay, like it would go kind of based like a signature or pattern based. It would notice like, okay, well, these things are checking these boxes that this previous attack did. So you'd hope that the AI learned from that, and if not, you could feed it, past vulnerabilities that we now know of and have fixed.
So kind of the hope is that like the AI could see something that is sort of adjacent to, it looks a lot like these, but it's not necessarily in the rule set, but it has the ability to say, you know what, this is close enough. It's not a match, but it's close enough that I want to raise some sort of alarm so that people are taking a look at this.
Yep. And then during your initial implementation, you're going to have a bunch of false positives.
So a lot of false positives right off the bat.
Right
Tell me
off
about
the gate, for the exact same reason you said. This kind of looks like a past attack that had already happened. NIST reported it. It looks a lot like it. Let's go ahead and alert just in case. Cody's a security analyst. He gets the alert. He's looking at it. He goes, nope, this is expected. It's a false positive. Now, whatever system's learning will go, okay, while it's close to a historical attack that did happen, maybe NIST posted about it, this is an okay behavior. We might get a couple more false positives, but after we keep saying, hey, this is actually okay, we're going to start to wean out those false positives and the alerts that do come in instead of them being noise. The hope is that those are real alerts. And that's where you got to have your, okay, what are we expecting? And then it comes down to a baseline. So you're going to have to take all your historical data, whether it's logged, bandwidth, metrics from different switches or whatever. What are you expecting? And during the implementation, try and give it all the what you would hope to expect, and as much of it as you can, to hopefully limitate the false positives. But limitation isn't also implemented the false positives, especially if we're implementing on a high-speed network. That could cause challenges.
I mean, because it's like, we've got, maybe 100 people on staff. So, I mean, we have a decent sized network, but when you take a look at the number of packets that are coming in and out of the point of contact between the wider internet and our network here, and then just the amount of traffic locally as well. This is millions and millions and millions of packets all day, every day. It's astounding that we can even begin to take a look at that.
Yeah, that's another key factor on like which intrusion prevention system you're gonna get. Is you got to be mindful of how many packets you're gonna be ingesting. Like at what level are you putting it? Are you putting it just in between like this switch and this group of computers, or are you putting it in between your whole company and the internet? Because if you have a company of 1,000 some people, you might you can't just have a weaker system do that. It will not. It won't like that. It's very RAM intensive. These, you're inspecting each packet as it's going through, especially if it's inline. And if that slows down, then, you'll, instead of it being secure, you'll get latency. And then you'll have your, the rest of your company complaining that it had slow network speeds. So
that's not even including encrypted packets. If you have encrypted packets, you're going to have your intrusion detection is going to, if you're doing like a deep packet analysis or deep packet inspection, DPI is the correct term. That's a lot of resource utilization right there, hardware specifically. That's going to heavily impact your network. So implementation, your scalability has to be one of the main things you keep in mind when you're going to implement IDS, IPS.
So this is not a trivial decision. This is not something you pick up on a Tuesday and you dust your hands off by Wednesday and you're all good.
Yeah, you can't just go down a conspiracy rabbit hole over the weekend, decide you're going to implement one of these and call her good on a Monday night. This is a multiple step process, at least a couple months with planning. That's not to say that you wouldn't want to try it on a testing environment first, so you can actually have an idea of what kind of log adjustment that you're going to have or packet analysis. You can start gathering metrics and all right, well, if our test environment only has 5,000 packets going out to the internet within a day, small environment, whatever. We bump that up to 7.5 million. What kind of resource utilization are we going to look at? How slow is our network going to be if we put it at the base, if we put it between, Suite 2 versus the main IDF? Has to be thought out, and it would not be able to be done within 3-4 days, unless, of course, you're spinning it up at home where there's 5-6 endpoint devices.
So obviously security is important, right? I mean, like who would argue that we should have less security? But like, how critical is intrusion detection and intrusion prevention? Can you live without it?
Well, I mean, I'd say you can, right? Like, I guess
You can.
I would say it's a wise decision to live without, because like, how would you know? Like, without these systems, how would you know if there's a bad actor exfiltrating data, right? Like, there could be a bad actor in your environment who's getting everyone's information. I mean, every company has to have like every employee's social or bank account information to send them money. Not to mention, if you sell to customers, it has the customer information. Depending on what your company is exactly, that'll vary on the degree of the information you hold on the customers. But if you have a lot of information on the customers, that could be a liability to you and to them. So I would say it's a very big need, in my personal opinion, that I would not live without. Because again, like, if you got someone up exfiltrating all your data and one day you wake up and you won't have a company or a job, it could be a very bad day for you.
Could be a bad day. And we've talked about Nagios XI and we've talked about Nagios Log Server, but of course we do have Nagios Network Analyzer. And so, and what is really driving this discussion is our desire to do more with that particular product, because right now it has a lot of tools based on NetFlow. And so we can set up rules, and we do have rules, and we can see based on very specific network data, not at the packet level, but at the NetFlow level, which, if we talk about that a little bit, sort of NetFlow skims the metadata off of packets effectively, and then aggregates that and then ships it over to Nagios Network Analyzer, where we can see, well, all right, we have traffic coming from this IP and this port. It will work in that case if we have IP address and port-based rules. We can see if we're engaging in traffic with geographies that should be disallowed in the network. So there is a lot of opportunity in Nagios Network Analyzer to take a look at this, but it's not at the packet level, or and so like, what do you think really is the benefit of getting to the packet level beyond the NetFlow level?
I would say like a big help to get down to the packet level would be the fact that you can like further inspect. Like, if you're just skimming the top, you only get a little bit of the data, right? You want like all the juicy bits because then you could get, from there, you could get false positives, right? But you could also get false negatives, which are even worse, because a false negative is something that is malicious, but the system thought it wasn't. So it just allowed something malicious through. And if you only skim the top, like, okay, maybe it's going to a known good, or not a known good, but like an IP address that's not necessarily bad. But inside the packet is a Trojan or some bad virus or something like that. That's where that packet level would come very big and handy, whereas the skim would be like, well, okay, the IP address, it's not coming up on any known bad areas because it's a brand new IP. Like, it's a brand new hack or a brand new exploitation.
Right. They have a new command and control server. Yep. And so, like, I think that's really a lot of what's driving this discussion for us as a company, and for me as a product manager, is, well, Network Analyzer is a great tool at the NetFlow level, and so in a lot of ways, that is one of the things that makes it really handy, is that, well, we don't have a lot of packet storage concerns, and there are things about the actual practice of doing that security work that we don't have to worry about with Network Analyzer because we're at the NetFlow level. So it's a great compromise, but we're looking to really extend it as well at the packet level. So, all right, coming into this discussion, I was focused like purely on the network side. So here's what I have so far. So there's intrusion detection and intrusion prevention. Intrusion detection can happen a couple of places in the network. One, it can happen at the barrier, right at the junction, right where your internal network intersects the internet. But intrusion detection can also happen inside the network, taking a look at traffic and hosts as well.
Yes.
Now, does intrusion prevention have to happen purely at the network level?
It doesn't necessarily have to happen like in between the internet and, your company, but that's where I would recommend, and I would say most people implement, because, like most of the things you'd want to prevent are coming from the internet. It's coming out from the World Wide Web. You would hope that you have enough security practices in your company that will prevent like a inside actor or a bad actor. So like you could put it in between two switches if you think there's something wrong there. But I would say a lot of what I've seen has been in between the internet and your router or your computer.
Yeah. And that's not to say like the rest of the intrusion prevention wouldn't be happening from within as well, like on hosts, as mentioned earlier. That's another method, but that's a whole separate intrusion prevention. That's like just security practice, preventing certain apps from starting child IDs, not opening this. Certain files get scanned when they come in from the internet. There's a couple other different like standard security practices like that. Application patching, obviously, stuff, but intrusion prevention can happen at multiple different levels. It's not limited to one space.
If you were going to sum all this up in a couple of sentences, what would your summary of this conversation and the question in general be?
I would say that IDS, IPS is something that everyone should have implemented. It's never too late if you don't have it now, fine. Get the plans together to put one in. You don't need all the bells and whistles. You don't need CrowdStrike or anything crazy commercially like that. You can start with the open source solutions
just to get started. And again, take into account scalability, hardware, resources. What do you have for now? Start there, and then work your way up. It's better to have something than have nothing at all. And then once you start getting to a point where you have a baseline understanding, you can have an idea of how much logs or how much data you're going to be ingesting. You have the resources available. You can start scaling out further. You can put taps in at the very entrance of your network. You can have intrusion detection within the network between switches, or you can have like Microsoft Defender as your host detection with hosts and making sure that those things are all good and dandy. When you start getting into the weeds is where you're going to have deep packet inspection, your DPI, because that's very resource intensive. You see that impact networks quite heavily. So most intrusion detections will have a DPI option, but most places will keep it off because of how resource intense it can be. So what I'm hearing is something's better than nothing.
Absolutely.
And start small. Grow your implementation as it makes sense, as you have resources,
right,
as you go along.
Yep. And then ask yourself the questions like, do we have a budget? Can we get a commercial product? Because there are commercial solutions out there that aren't, Storant, Sericata, and Zeek. Those are the three main open source ones. If you're looking for commercial, you got your Cisco Firepower. You got Check-In Point IPS, which is a great one. I've heard a lot of great things about. And then FortGate, which is a new one. And I've only researched it a little bit, but I've heard that it's kind of leaning more towards the Nessus stuff.
What's your summary, Cody?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of things that Brandon said. It's never too late. Never think like, oh, well, I haven't had it now. Like, I've been fine now. It's like, you think you're fine. You think you're okay, but maybe once you put that, that system in, you'll be like, ooh, I'm getting flagged every couple minutes for something. Like, oh, it's never a matter of if you're gonna get hacked. It's always a matter of when. So, knowing that there's a system in place to help increase your security and increase the chance of you detecting a bad actor getting into your network will always be better than having nothing. Like I'd rather have some flimsy fence protecting me than letting the floodgates open and.
And that's what's astounding to me is that like even the smallest barrier keeps us safer, right? I like a fence that is even maybe easily hopped is better than no fence at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. For everybody out there, if you've got comments or questions or stories you want to tell us those in the comments. But otherwise, all I got to say is happy monitoring.